We have 2 incidences in less than 8 months where 439 people have died.
He says he has the means that may have prevented the Air India crash and many other aviation disasters over the years. I'm May K. Bueller here with Queen City News Plus. Welcome to Inside the Cockpit. We have a wonderful show for you today, but most importantly, one that will be one of the most meaningful and possibly valuable episodes we will ever do because it has the potential to save countless lives. The gentleman you will meet is a safety expert who has come up with a patent that could have prevented the Air India crash and many others. First, let's talk about the Air India crash, just give you a little bit of background about it. So our guest, Roger Chandler, says that with this patent, it could have saved lives if only the FAA and other officials had considered it. It could have prevented both engines from being shut down in the Air India case. So it was in June when Air India Flight 171 crashed into a building just moments after takeoff, killing 241 people on board and sparing a lone survivor. 19 people on the ground were killed. Both pilots died in the crash, leaving investigators to rely on the black boxes and a chilling mayday call to help determine what went wrong. While investigators have yet to release the final report, because that will take a year or more, there is information raising eyebrows. One of the world's deadliest aviation accidents is raising questions about pilot behavior or pilot error. Did it play a role? Investigators released information stating the Air India Flight 171 accident happened because both engines lost power. Information reveals the fuel supply to both engines was cut off during the critical moments just after liftoff, impeding the plane's ability to climb. Revelations gleaned from the Boeing 787 Dreamliner's cockpit voice recorder, cited in India's report, discloses audio of one of the pilots asking why the other had turned the fuel switches off, cutting off the fuel. In the audio recording, the other pilot said he did not do so. Within seconds, the switches were reversed back to run or on. According to the report, both engines were able to relight, but it was too late to stop the plane's loss of lift and deadly descent. Roger Chandler joins us now. Roger, welcome. You have a long-time career as an aviation safety expert. You're here for a very important reason today, and we want to thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you have something that's dear to your heart that you've worked on, a patent that you feel could have saved lives.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your background.
I started my aviation career right out of high school and started with an organization called Flight Safety International, who is the premier aviation training company in the world. And I've been with that company for 42 years. I'm now retired. And so that company and myself, we have always been about pilot safety, making pilots better, making the skies safer, and a company that exists for safety.
Yeah, so you are a safety expert. You've made a career out of this. You're also a pilot.
Yes.
How did you come up? First of all, what is the patent? And let's try to make it as simple as possible so we can all understand what it does.
Sure. Well, the patent is aircraft engines have their own computer. It's the brain, and it's called the FADEC. And the left engine and the right engine, FADECs, they know what each other is doing at all times. And so in the case of this Air India, where the pilot may have intentionally selected both off, with my patent, the pilot would not have been able to do so. It says, one engine says, well, wait a minute, he's trying to turn me off, but the other engine's already shut off. I'm not going to allow the pilot to do so. And that's what the patent would do. It would always keep one engine running in case of pilot error, accidental or intentional.
So FADEC, full authority digital engine control, they're computers that talk to each other.
Exactly.
Okay. So in this Air India accident, investigators say they were both switches were turned off and then on again once the other pilot called them out on it. Can you show us the switch that you have so that we can explain to folks that this was not an accident? It's not like a light switch that you maybe accidentally turned it on or off. This
Sure.
was spring loaded. So tell us about that.
Sure. The switch is the lever mechanism has a locking lever, which means you just can't pull down. It's in the up position right now. You can't pull down. It takes 4 pounds of force with both fingers before you can rotate it to the off position, which I just did. There again, to put it back to the run position, you must pull outward on the switch, then move it up and release the spring-loaded action. And that is exactly how many, many aircraft are, including the 787 Dreamliner.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So obviously they have to be turned on when you start the engines and the airplane is running. We have to have fuel. We have to have fuel and air and an ignition and igniting for the engine to work. So that had to be on. And so when they turned it off, what happened?
The pilot selected both of them off. The FADEX will have, with the patent change, would say, okay, it would have allowed that pilot to shut one engine down,
but not the other.
But the other FADEC would have said, no, the left engine's down. I'm not going to let him shut me down, and thus prevented both engines in this instance from an intentional shutdown.
Right, and we have non-pilot folks watching this as well. Need to understand that an airplane can fly on one engine. So it's just a matter of shutting the engine down. And you can fly on one engine, but the two engines are gone. You don't have any thrust. So this was a deadly situation that could have been prevented. Have you presented this patent to the FAA and to the powers that be?
Sure. When I started writing the patent, I talked to an FAA official in Washington, D.C. He was fairly high up. And when I discussed it with him, he pretty much shut it down. He said, because the rules that the FAA say that if the pilot wants to select that switch off, he must not be impeded from doing so. And I said, even if the other engine has already shut down? And he said, absolutely. And that's the way it works. So that was a bit disheartening.
Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely not, because there's, things in our everyday lives that, we do let the computer, such as in automobiles, take the auto braking on cars now. You're going down the highway in your car and you get distracted and somebody slams on brakes in front of you. The computer in the car hits the auto braking. Same for lane assist. When your car gets going, if you haven't locked your doors, once the car starts moving forward at about 15, 20 mile an hour, the computer automatically locks your car doors, for safety.
Right. Kevin, can you show us the picture of the fuel of the panel so we can see what this looks like in the airplane? So a couple airplanes have this. This is the 787 Dreamliner. This is the Air India crash we're talking about. And you showed us how this switch worked before. So we have cut off and run. And again, it's spring loaded. You have to pull it out and up. We can't accidentally switch these. We're leaving this up to the India air transport investigators to decide if they will ever know why these were put in the off. We have no idea why this would happen. Are there other accidents that you can tell us about that were in the news where your patent could have helped?
Well, the original patent design was based off a TransAsia flight 235 that took out of Taipei and Taiwan, and they lost an engine on takeoff, and they accidentally shut down the incorrect engine, and they were only about 1,500 feet above ground level, and they did not have enough time to restart both engines. So that was in 2015. But let's advance to just less than 8 months ago to the Jeju Air Flight 2216 from Bangkok to South Korea. And that was December 29th, 2024. It was a Boeing 737, and that aircraft was on landing, and they got a bird strike. And one engine was severely damaged, but the authorities are now saying are focusing on the fact that the pilot accidentally shut down the other engine And so Boeing, the NTSB, and the FAA are all in assistance with the South Korean authorities to investigate that, but that's what they're now saying. So we have two incidences in less than 8 months where 439 people have died because of the fuel cutoff switch, either accidentally or intentionally shut off.
Wow. So I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break and we'll be back right after this with Roger Chandler. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to Inside the Cockpit. May Bueller. Roger Chandler joins us today, safety expert, talking about a patent that he says could have prevented the Air India crash and several other high-profile disasters and could save countless lives if he can get the proper attention it needs to be instigated or put into various aircraft. So tell us again, just very briefly, again, just to review, how the patent works.
Okay. When the pilot selects the fuel cutoff switch from run to off, that typically on modern aircraft with FADEC sends a signal to the FADEC, and the FADEC says the pilot wants the engine to shut down. So the FADEC turns off the fuel to the engine, and that's all that's required to shut down the engine.
Okay. How often does a pilot shut down the wrong engine? So non-pilots, you just need to know there are procedures. When you have an engine out, typically you have two engines on an airplane, and it can fly on one engine, but it's considered an emergency. You're going to come back and land or go to the nearest suitable airport. But you can shut that engine down via the checklist and fly the plane on one engine. But sometimes pilots shut the wrong engine down, and we wonder, how can that happen if you have a co-pilot with you? Because everything should be verified, right? Verify. Left engine is dead. Verify before you do that. How often do pilots shut the wrong engine down?
It's, well, in the examples we gave, it's been twice in 2 months.
That you know of, yeah.
That we know of. I've talked with co-workers, experienced 747 captains who came to me when they found out I was writing this and said that this happens more often than you would realize. So I think there's a lot of cases that we never hear about. I spoke with an FAA person that was on the national sim team out of Atlanta, a gentleman named Bob Maynard, who said that this patent, this idea is so simple that it's brilliant, and that I should pursue getting somebody to listen to get this patent or the design change put into aircraft.
How do we get the right people to know about this?
Hopefully that the right people will see this story, and aviation professionals, be it if they're airline pilots, or even flight attendants, and frequent flyers. Everybody needs to be aware that these two crashes in the last 8 months were unnecessary and could have been prevented.
And when you came up with this patent, you never could have imagined that a flight crew member would turn both engines off at the same time or cut them off. You did this, as you said before, with a thought in mind that if one engine failed, it would prevent the flight officer from shutting down the wrong engine by accident. Then both engines are gone, right? But who would have thought that in this scenario, somebody would cut both engines off? But your patent would have prevented both engines from going out, because the FADEC, the full authority digital engine control, the computer would have said, no, even if it's 1 second apart, you tried to do this one, that's already gone. I'm not letting you shut the other down. Is that correct, Roger?
Exactly. When I was designing the patent, I never considered a pilot intentionally. And when I saw y'all's news story on this crash, I immediately thought about the patent and said, with the patent, the pilot would not have, he would have been allowed to shut one engine down.
Right.
But, and we're talking fractions of a second, that the FADEC of the other engine would have said, well, the left engine's down, and I'm not going to let him to shut the number, myself down the second engine. And so the patent would have worked in this instant on an intentional attempt at shutting both engines down.
How important is this to you?
It's my entire life of my career has been dealing with aviation safety, working on full flight simulators, the most advanced simulators in the world, and supporting over 400 simulators throughout the world.
Wow.
And so, yes, it's. I wanted to be a pilot, and eyesight and hearing restrictions disallowed that. And so I luckily got on with this wonderful company and dedicated my entire career to aviation safety.
Well, it sounds genius to me, just like you said, somebody else said. Hopefully, we're going to make this happen. Over the years, you've been in aviation so long. How has it changed over the years? And these past 2 years, there have been so many mishaps in the news, and people want to know: is it safe to fly?
It's a lot of, Airbus, for instance, is trying to now take large body aircraft and put a single pilot in the cockpit. And they're even saying the pilot is going to be there as a backup because
Yeah.
they're wanting the avionics to be the controlling factor of these flights. And so,
Well, you specialize in avionics. How
yes,
do you feel about that?
I feel better with two pilots in the cockpit.
Because we know automation can fail.
Absolutely.
I had been in learning to fly before, or getting used to a new aircraft before, where the autopilot did weird things. And I'd say to my captain, "Why did it do that?" And he said to me, "I don't know."
Mhm.
I'm
Well,
not kidding. How do you think that makes a first officer or a co-pilot feel when you ask that and they say, "I don't know"?
the amount of electronics and computers on aircraft now, like you're saying, not just the last 2 years, but the last 15 years, and it's getting more and more. There's way more software, and the actual uh, electronics and avionics in an aircraft are individual PC based computers. And so, how often do you have to reboot your
Yeah.
laptop,
Yeah.
due to
Yeah.
something? And yes, that does happen in the aircraft. And the pilots are, occasionally having to pull circuit breakers to reboot MAU chassis that control all the avionics. And so it's a bit concerning, and you need both pilots there because the complexity of the systems now, I think, requires two pilots. One is overwhelming for one pilot.
I totally agree. That's why you have a monitoring pilot. Plus, think about, well, we'll talk about this in a minute. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. We'll talk about pilot health. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside the Cockpit. Roger Chandler is talking with us today about a patent he has that could save multiple lives. We're talking about the future, that there are rumblings that could go to a one-person flight crew and automation handles everything else, which even Captain Sully Sullenberger says this is ridiculous. You need a two-pilot crew, two brains, two sets of eyes, because really it's just you're just monitoring automation. That's all you're really doing anymore. Once you turn that autopilot on, right? We're not flying the plane anymore. But that's pretty scary if you're just relying on automation, because things go wrong. Things go wrong. So we want to wrap this up. This is your opportunity to plea to folks out there, for somebody that knows the right way to get this patent taken seriously. In an ideal world, what do you want people to know, and what help do you need to get the word out there?
I just, anybody listening that's, if they're related with the FAA or any other aviation authority, if they're airline pilots, if you're, work for any of the airline companies, to please, let's get this open. And the more people that know about it, I think we stand a better chance of doing that. And I can be reached at, my email address is acfuelcutoff@gmail.com.
Roger, what is the name of your patent?
It's aircraft fuel shutoff interlock, and it's the U.S. Patent Office filed there about 8 years ago.
Okay, well, we send you all sorts of good vibes that if this can save countless lives, my God, let's get it out there. Thank you for telling your story. First time you've talked about this in the media?
Yes,
It is. Okay, let's get the word out there. And why is this important to you?
saving lives.
Saving lives. That's what it's all about, Roger Chandler. Wow, Inside the Cockpit, I told you this might be the most important episode we ever do. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for joining us. I'm May K. Bueller here at Queen City News Plus. We'll see you next time.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.